The hostage never screamed. Not when they dragged him from the armored car, not when blood from his split lip stained the white collar of his shirt, and not when Dante Moretti pressed a gun beneath his chin and said, "Your father has 12 hours to return what he stole." The young Omega only looked at him. No pleading, no denial, just a pair of dark, steady eyes that made the most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast hesitate for one fatal second. Around them, the warehouse remained tense and silent. Dante's men had blocked every exit, confiscated 3 weapons, and pulled a silver signet ring from the hostage's pocket, the crest of the Valenti family, Dante's oldest enemy. The evidence was undeniable. This was Luca Valenti, the enemy's only son, and now he belonged to Dante's war. "Make him answer," Dante ordered. One of his men tightened a fist in Luca's hair and jerked his head back. Luca's throat moved. His lips parted. Nothing came out. The man struck him across the face. Dante's hand closed around the attacker's wrist before the second blow could land. The movement was so fast that everyone froze. "I said make him answer," Dante said quietly. "I did not say damage him." His lieutenant released Luca at once, but the look he gave Dante was sharp with surprise. Dante ignored it. He crouched in front of the hostage and examined him more closely. There were old scars along Luca's throat, pale and precise, partly hidden beneath his collar. Not fresh wounds. Not an act. Dante pulled a pen from his jacket and placed it beside a shipping manifest on the floor. "Right." Luca stared at the paper. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not fear. Shame. His fingers hovered over the pen, then curled against his palm. Dante had seen that look before, not in hostages, but in men who had spent years being punished for failing at something everyone else found easy. Behind Luca, one of the guards produced a phone taken during the abduction. The screen showed 7 missed calls from a number saved only as father. Dante answered the 8th. "Moretti." A breath crackled across the line. Then Carlo Valenti's voice came, cold and controlled. "You took the wrong person." Dante watched Luca's face. No surprise. No relief. "Your son carries your ring." "He carries my name," Valenti replied. "That does not make him useful." Luca's eyes dropped. The small movement cut through Dante more sharply than it should have. 12 hours, Dante said. "Return the ledger, or I send him home in pieces." Silence followed. Dante expected rage, negotiation, threats. Instead, Valenti said, "Do what you need to do," and ended the call. The warehouse seemed colder after that. Luca did not move, but the last trace of defiance left his shoulders. Dante understood the truth before anyone said it aloud. Luca had not been taken from a protected convoy. He had been placed inside one that was deliberately underguarded. His father had known Dante's men were watching. Maybe he had even known they would strike. Luca was not merely a hostage. He was disposable. Dante rose slowly, fury gathering beneath his calm. He had built his empire by recognizing leverage, and Carlo Valenti had just declared his own son worthless. That should have made Luca useless to him. Instead, Dante found himself looking again at the scars on the Omega's throat. "Move him upstairs," he ordered. "Private room. 2 guards outside." His lieutenant frowned. "Boss, if Valenti won't trade, then we find out why." The words ended the discussion, but not the suspicion. As the men pulled Luca to his feet, the Omega stumbled. Dante caught him by the forearm. The instant their skin touched, pain flashed through Dante's chest. Hot, electric, impossible. His gun slipped from his other hand and struck the concrete. Every alpha instinct inside him surged awake at once, not with hunger, but recognition. Mine. The word entered his mind with such force that he nearly released Luca. Luca felt it too. His eyes widened. His breath broke silently, and his free hand clutched Dante's sleeve as if the floor had vanished beneath him. For one suspended moment, the warehouse, the feud, and the armed men around them ceased to exist. Dante could hear Luca's heartbeat. Too fast. Frightened. Familiar. Then the scent blockers at Luca's wrist cracked beneath the pressure of Dante's grip. A faint fragrance. Escaped. Rain on warm stone, wild honey, and something deeper that struck Dante like a memory from a life he had never lived. His alpha rose violently. Several men stepped back. "Boss?" his lieutenant whispered. Dante released Luca and forced his face into stillness, but the damage had already been done. Everyone had seen him lose control. Luca's gaze remained fixed on him, filled now with a fear different from before. He knew something had happened. He just could not ask what. Dante bent, picked up his gun, and pointed it toward the floor instead of the hostage. "Take him upstairs," he said. No one moved. His lieutenant's eyes dropped to Dante's hand. A thin red line had appeared across his palm, where Luca's nails had broken the skin. Dante stared at the blood, then at the mute Omega being held between his men. The wound should have meant nothing. Instead, every instinct in his body demanded that no one else touch him. And for the first time since taking Carlo Valenti's son, Dante wondered whether he had captured his enemy's greatest weakness, or brought his own into the heart of his empire. Dante had barely reached the stairwell when his phone vibrated with an encrypted alert. The Valenti family had released a statement claiming Luca had been abducted by unknown criminals and denying that Carlo Valenti had any son in Moretti custody. The lie spread across every police channel and news desk within minutes. It did more than erase Luca from the negotiation. It gave Carlo permission to attack without admitting he was sacrificing his own blood. Dante stopped halfway up the stairs and read the message twice. Below him, his men were already sealing the warehouse. Metal shutters slammed over the loading doors. Engines started in the courtyard. Whatever Luca's father had planned, it was moving faster than the 12-hour deadline. "Change of orders," Dante said. "No one enters or leaves without my approval." His lieutenant, Marco, glanced toward Luca. "And him. He stays alive." Luca looked at Dante sharply, as though the words surprised him. Dante hated that reaction. It meant Luca had expected something else. The private room upstairs had no windows, only a steel door, a narrow bed, and a camera mounted in one corner. Marco removed Luca's restraints, but left 2 armed guards outside. Dante placed the pen and paper on the small table between them. "Your father says you don't exist." Luca's face did not change. That was worse than shock. It was recognition. He picked up the pen with stiff fingers and wrote 3 words. "He means it." Dante turned the paper toward himself. "Why?" Luca hesitated, then wrote again. "Because I failed him." The word failed had been pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through the page. Dante looked at the scars along Luca's throat. "Failed him how?" Luca's hand froze. His breathing changed. He set the pen down and covered his throat with one palm, shutting the conversation down without a word. Dante could have forced the issue. He was used to fear opening doors. Instead, he slid the paper back. "Then tell me something useful. Why was your convoy underguarded?" Luca wrote more quickly this time. "It was not my convoy." Beneath it, after a pause, "I was told I was being transferred." "Transferred where?" Luca shook his head. Before Dante could continue, 3 gunshots cracked through the lower level. The lights flickered. An alarm screamed once, then died. Marco's voice burst through Dante's earpiece. "East entrance breached. They had our access code." Dante drew his weapon and pushed Luca behind him. That movement came without thought, and Luca noticed. His eyes dropped to Dante's arms stretched across his chest like a barrier. A second explosion rattled the room. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Stay here," Dante ordered. Luca grabbed his sleeve and shook his head hard. Then he pointed to the camera. A small green light blinked above the lens. Dante followed his gaze. The camera was still transmitting, even though the building's security system had gone dark. Someone had isolated its feed. Luca crossed to the table, wrote 1 word, and held it up. "Watching." Dante fired once. The camera shattered. A bullet struck the steel door from the corridor at the same moment. The guards outside shouted. One went silent. Dante pulled Luca into the narrow space beside the bed as the lock began to turn. "How did they know?" "This room," he demanded. Luca's face had gone pale. He pointed to his own jacket. Dante searched it and found nothing until his fingers reached the inner seam. Hidden beneath the stitching was a tracking chip no larger than a grain of rice. Carlo had not merely allowed his son to be captured. He had sent Luca inside Dante's base as a beacon. The door burst inward. A masked gunman entered, weapon raised, not toward Dante, but directly at Luca. Dante fired first. The attacker collapsed across the threshold. Luca stared at the body, then at the symbol tattooed behind the man's ear, the Valenti crest. His father's soldier had come to kill him. The realization broke through Luca's control. He backed into the wall, one hand gripping his throat, the other shaking violently. Dante removed the tracker and crushed it beneath his heel. They won't get another chance. Luca looked at him with raw disbelief. Dante understood why. Carlo's message had been clear. Luca's death was more useful than his return. Marco appeared in the doorway with blood on his collar. We contained the breach. For dead. One of ours gave them the code. His gaze moved from the Valeni assassin to Luca. This happened because of him. Luca lowered his eyes. Dante stepped between them. This happened because someone inside my organization sold access. Marco's expression tightened. He brought the tracker. Without knowing it. You don't know that. Dante did not answer immediately. Luca did. He crossed to the table and wrote while both men watched. Then he pushed the paper toward Marco. If I wanted him dead, I would not have warned him about the camera. Marco read it, but suspicion remained. Dante saw something else. Luca had written, I would not have warned him, not I would not have warned you. He was speaking to Marco, defending Dante, even after Dante had abducted him. The balance in the room shifted. Luca was still a prisoner, but no longer a passive one. He had just chosen a side for one dangerous moment. Marco touched his earpiece. Boss, we found the traitor. A pause. His face hardened. It's Tomas. Dante went still. Tomas had served him for 11 years. He knew every safe house, every route, every weakness. And he had been the man who first suggested taking Luca Valeni. Dante looked at the dead assassin, the crushed tracker, and the silent Omega who had been delivered into his hands too easily. This abduction had never been Dante's plan. It had been Carlo Valeni's trap, and someone inside Dante's empire had helped build it. Then Luca reached for the paper again and wrote a final sentence that made the room fall silent. Tomas is the man who took my voice. Before Dante could question him, the warehouse speakers crackled to life and Tomas's voice filled the building. If Luca told you my name, you have less than 10 minutes. Every surviving guard looked toward the ceiling. Dante did not. He watched Luca. The Omega had gone rigid, his hand pressed against the scars on his throat as if Tomas's voice had reopened them. Where is he? Dante asked Marco. Security room. Locked himself inside. Cut the power. He already isolated the controls. The overhead lights turned red. Steel fire doors slammed shut across the lower floor, dividing Dante's men into separate sections. Then the ventilation system started. A sweet chemical smell drifted into the room. Luca reacted first. His pupils widened, and he stumbled against the table. Dante caught him before he fell. The scent was nearly odorless beneath the smoke from the gunfight, but Dante recognized the effect. An Omega suppressant delivered at a dangerous concentration. Enough could stop Luca's breathing. Masks! Marco shouted. Dante tore a cloth from his sleeve, pressed it over Luca's mouth and nose, and pulled him into the corridor. The safest route was sealed. The only open path led toward the security room and Tomas. Luca gripped Dante's wrist and pointed toward a service hatch near the floor. Dante kicked it open. Behind it ran a narrow maintenance tunnel. You know this building? He asked. Luca shook his head, then took the pen from his pocket and wrote against the wall with shaking hands. Tomas used the same system before. The sentence changed everything. This was not merely an attack on Dante's base. Tomas had designed it from a method he had already used on Luca. They crawled through the passage while Marco covered the entrance. Halfway down, Luca stopped beside a junction box and pulled loose a cable with practiced precision. The red emergency lights died. So did the ventilation fans. Dante stared at him. Luca had not guessed. He knew exactly which wire controlled the system. He made you learn this, Dante said. Luca looked away. That was answer enough. A gunshot struck the metal above them. Tomas had found their route. Dante pushed Luca forward, but Luca seized his sleeve and pointed to a second hatch marked with a faded medical symbol. They emerged inside an abandoned clinic built into the warehouse's oldest section. Rusted cabinets lined the walls. A restraint chair stood beneath a broken surgical lamp. Luca froze in the doorway. His breathing became shallow. Dante saw leather straps, an old cauterizing tool, and a tray of instruments that had no place in his organization. On the wall, almost hidden beneath peeling paint, were scratches arranged in groups of 5. Luca crossed the room and touched them. His fingers trembled. This was where Tomas had taken his voice. The discovery struck Dante harder than any confession could have. The room belonged to his warehouse. The equipment had been powered by his generators. Whatever had happened to Luca had happened inside Dante's territory, under the protection of the Moretti name. How long ago? Dante asked. Luca raised 3 fingers. 3 years. Dante's chest tightened. Tomas had served him then, trusted him then, had stood at his right hand while secretly using Dante's property to torture the enemy's son. A monitor on the desk flickered on. Tomas appeared on the screen, older than Dante remembered from an hour ago, his face gray with exhaustion and hatred. You finally found my workshop. Dante raised his gun toward the camera. Open the doors. Tomas smiled. You still think this is about escape? Behind him, a timer counted down from 6 minutes. Carlo paid me to silence the boy after Luca overheard something he shouldn't have. But your little hostage survived. Worse, he remembered me. Luca's jaw tightened. Dante stepped closer to the screen. What did he hear? Ask him. Tomas's gaze shifted toward Luca. Go on. Tell the great Dante Moretti why your father cut your throat and called it an accident. Luca reached for the pen, but the tremor in his hand was too severe. Dante took the paper and held it steady for him. Luca wrote slowly. The ledger is not money. Tomas laughed through the speaker. There it is. Luca continued. It contains names. Judges. Police. Families. Then, beneath that, Moretti names too. Dante read the words twice. The stolen ledger was not merely Valenti leverage. It was proof of corruption tying both empires together. If released, it would destroy Carlo, Dante, and everyone loyal to them. Tomas had manipulated Dante into taking Luca because Luca was the only surviving witness who knew what the ledger truly contained. The timer dropped below 5 minutes. What happens when it reaches 0? Dante asked. Tomas leaned closer to the camera. Every file goes public. Unless you bring Luca to me. Marco cursed under his breath. Boss, if that ledger drops, half the city turns on us. Dante looked at Luca. The Omega's face was pale, but he did not step away. Instead, he wrote another sentence. He is lying about the timer. Dante glanced at the screen. Tomas's smile disappeared. Luca pointed to the restraint chair, then to the old monitor. He moved to a cabinet, pulled open the bottom drawer, and found a hidden receiver wired into the building's network. The timer was not connected to an external upload. It was connected to the warehouse's sealed lower vault. What's in the vault? Marco asked. Luca wrote, the original ledger. Tomas's threat had revealed his real objective. He had not come to expose the ledger. He had come to retrieve it before Dante discovered the truth. A metal door slammed somewhere beyond the clinic. Footsteps approached. Dante handed Marco his spare weapon. Get the men out of the sealed sections. And you? I'm ending this. Luca blocked the doorway. For the first time, he looked directly at Dante and shook his head with open refusal. Then he pointed to himself, to the security corridor, and finally to the scars on his throat. He wanted to go with him. Dante's first instinct was to order him back. His second was stronger. Keep him where no one could touch him. But Luca had already spent years being moved, hidden, traded, and silenced by powerful men claiming they knew what was best. Dante lowered the gun between them. Your choice, he said. Luca held his gaze, then stepped to Dante's side. It was not trust. Not yet. But it was the first decision Dante had allowed him to make since the abduction, and Luca answered by choosing the most dangerous place in the building, beside him. They reached the security corridor as Tomas emerged from the smoke with a detonator in one hand and a pistol in the other. He aimed at Luca. Dante moved in front of him. Tomas's expression changed. You don't know what he is. I know what you did to him. No, Tomas said. You know what Carlo ordered. You don't know why. He pressed the detonator halfway down. Somewhere below them, heavy locks released. The vault door began to open. Luca didn't just overhear the names in that ledger, Tomas said. He added one. Luca went still behind Dante. Tomas smiled at the shock in Dante's face. Ask your silent little hostage whose name he wrote, and why Carlo Valenti would rather kill his own son than let you read it. Tomas pressed the detonator fully, and the vault door finished opening with a mechanical groan that echoed through the warehouse. At the same moment, every phone in the building began to ring. Marco checked his screen first. His face tightened. Valenti men hit 2 of our docks. 1 burned. 6 missing. The pressure was no longer contained inside the warehouse. Carlo had used the breach to strike Dante's territory while his command was fractured. Dante kept his gun trained on Tomas. Drop the detonator. You still think this is a negotiation? Tomas stepped backward toward the vault corridor. Carlo knows Luca is alive. He also knows you protected him. By sunrise, every family in the city will call you compromised. Luca moved beside Dante, not behind him. His eyes stayed on Tomas, but his hand reached for the pen in his pocket. Tomas noticed. Go ahead, he said. Write the name. Luca's fingers stopped. Dante saw the conflict move across his face, the urge to reveal the truth. Fighting years of trained fear. Then gunfire erupted below. Marco touched his earpiece. Moretti crews are turning on each other. Tomas sent messages from your private channel before we cut the system. A new consequence landed immediately. Dante's own captains believed he had ordered conflicting attacks. Tomas had not only opened the vault, he had broken Dante's authority. Your empire is already choosing sides, Tomas said. Give me Luca, and I can stop the rest. Dante fired. The bullet struck the wall beside Tomas's head, forcing him away from the control panel. Marco moved toward the vault, but Tomas hit another switch. Steel bars dropped between them, cutting Marco off from Dante and Luca. Smoke poured from vents near the floor. 2 minutes before this corridor seals, Marco warned. Boss, we need the ledger. Dante looked at Luca. Whose name did you add? Luca tore a sheet from the pad and wrote with urgent strokes. Not a name. A code. He held it up. Tomas's expression changed before Dante even understood. Luca wrote again, payment transfers. Dates. Routes. Then a final line. Proof Tomas served both families. The discovery shifted the entire conflict. Luca had not altered the ledger to destroy Dante. He had added evidence exposing Tomas as the bridge between Carlo Valini's network and the Moretti organization. Carlo had ordered Luca silenced because the code proved his alliance with Dante's most trusted man. Tomas had engineered the feud, profited from both sides, and made each family blame the other for years of bloodshed. You started the war, Dante said. Tomas's jaw hardened. I gave both of you what you wanted. An enemy. Luca reached toward the vault. Dante understood. The ledger could prove it, but only if they reached it before Tomas destroyed the evidence. Dante grabbed Luca's wrist and ran. They entered the vault corridor as metal doors began closing behind them. Tomas fired twice. One bullet struck Dante's shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Luca caught him before he fell. Blood spread across Dante's shirt. Tomas advanced, weapon steady. Move away from him, Luca. Luca did not. Instead, he stepped in front of Dante. The gesture hit harder. Then the bullet. In the warehouse, Dante had shielded Luca without thinking. Now Luca returned the choice, placing his own body between Dante and the man who had taken his voice. Tomas laughed once. He kidnapped you. Luca raised the paper in his shaking hand. On it, he had written, he gave me a choice. Tomas aimed directly at his chest. Dante forced himself upright and fired from behind Luca's shoulder. Tomas ducked into the vault. The shot missed, but it gave them enough time to reach the threshold. Inside, shelves of cash and weapons lined the walls. At the center sat a black metal case. Tomas reached it first. He entered a code, opened the lid, and pulled out a thick ledger bound in cracked leather. This book doesn't save you, he said. It proves Dante's father paid Carlo 20 years ago. Dante stopped. For what? Tomas tore several pages free and tossed them onto the floor. One landed near Luca's feet. The entry showed a payment from the Moretti family to a Valini-controlled clinic on the night Dante's mother died. Another listed a medical transport, an unnamed infant, and a sealed destination. Dante's focus narrowed. His mother had supposedly died in an ambush. There had never been any infant. What is this? He demanded. Tomas smiled. The reason Carlo never feared you. Before Dante could reach him, Tomas set fire to the torn pages. Flames climbed instantly. Luca dropped to his knees and pulled one sheet free, burning his palm. Tomas slammed the metal case shut and activated a lock on the vault wall. A countdown appeared, 60 seconds. The warehouse charges were always real, he said, just not connected to the first timer. Marco shouted through the bars, ordering evacuation. Dante could hear his men retreating below. Tomas backed toward an emergency exit hidden behind the shelves, carrying the ledger. Dante moved after him, but pain tore through his shoulder. Luca caught him again. Dante pointed toward Tomas. The book. Luca shook his head and pointed toward the main corridor, where the fire was spreading. He was choosing Dante over the evidence that could clear his own name. Dante understood the cost. If Tomas escaped with the ledger, Luca would remain a disposable traitor in his father's eyes, and Dante's empire would continue collapsing around a lie. Go, Dante said. I can still stop him. Luca refused. 30 seconds. The smoke thickened. Dante grabbed Luca's face gently, forcing him to meet his eyes. This is your choice, not mine. Luca looked toward Tomas, then toward the exit. For 1 second, Dante expected him to run after the ledger. Instead, Luca pulled Dante's uninjured arm around his shoulders and dragged him toward Marco. Trust had shifted again, not because the danger was gone, but because Luca had chosen Dante while the truth burned behind them. Marco shot the locking mechanism as the countdown reached 10. The bars lifted just high enough for Luca to push Dante underneath. They reached the stairwell when the explosion tore through the vault. The blast threw all 3 men against the wall. The floor buckled. Fire rolled through the corridor, swallowing the evidence and sealing Tomas's escape route. Outside, sirens and gunfire surrounded the warehouse. Dante's captains were demanding orders. Carlo's men were taking territory. Tomas was missing with the original ledger, and Dante had lost the proof that could stop the war. Luca opened his burned hand. The single page he had saved was blackened around the edges, but one line remained readable. Infant transferred under Moretti authorization. Male Omega, blood match confirmed. Dante stared at the date. It was the same night his mother died. Beneath the entry was Carlo Valenti's signature, and beside it, the name of the infant's destination. Luca pointed to the line, then to himself. Dante looked from the page to the scars on Luca's throat, believing at last that he understood why Carlo had tried so desperately to erase him. Luca Valenti was not Carlo's biological son. According to the ledger, he had been born a Moretti. The page in Luca's burned hand looked like proof that he was a Moretti, until Dante noticed the clinic code printed beneath the words blood match confirmed. It was not a family registry number. It was a compatibility classification. Before he could say it, gunfire tore through the warehouse's front courtyard, and Marco shoved them toward the emergency exit. Carlo's crews are closing both streets. We have maybe 90 seconds. Dante wrapped Luca's injured hand in a strip of his own shirt and pulled him through the smoke. His shoulder burned with every step, but Luca stayed beneath his uninjured arm, supporting more of Dante's weight than his narrow frame should have managed. They reached an armored SUV as the warehouse windows exploded behind them. Marco drove. 2 surviving guards fired through the rear ports while black vehicles pursued them through the industrial district. Dante spread the scorched page across his knee. This code, he said. Do you recognize it? Luca wiped soot from the lower corner, then nodded once. He took the pen Dante had given him and wrote against the page's blank margin. Clinic tested me every year. For blood relation? Luca shook his head. He wrote another word. Resonance. The SUV swerved as bullets struck the rear glass. Dante looked at Luca, remembering the violent shock when their skin first touched, the scent that had awakened something older than reason, the way his instincts had demanded that every other man step away. He had called it stress. Alpha aggression. A reaction to danger. Luca had known enough to fear it. What were they testing you against? Dante asked. Luca's pen stopped. He drew a small symbol instead, a broken circle crossed by 2 vertical lines. Dante had seen it before, not on a family crest, but embossed on sealed medical files his father had kept in a private safe. Files that vanished after his death. Marco turned sharply into an underground parking structure and killed the headlights. The pursuing vehicles rushed past the entrance. Safe house is compromised, he said. Tomas sent every address to Carlo. I know one place neither of them has used. 10 minutes later, they entered a shuttered private clinic beneath an abandoned church. The doctor waiting inside took one look at Dante's shoulder and ordered him onto a metal table. Dante refused until Luca was treated first. Marco noticed. So did Luca. The doctor cleaned the burn across Luca's palm, then examined the old scars on his throat. Her expression darkened. These weren't made to kill him, she said. They were made to destroy the vocal cords while preserving every other function. Luca looked away. Dante placed the scorched ledger page beside her. Tell me what that code means. She went still. Where did you get this? Answer. She traced the broken circle symbol. It belonged to the St. Orizan Bonding Institute. Officially, they studied hereditary scent disorders. Unofficially, powerful families paid them to identify fated compatibility before presentation. Dante's attention snapped to Luca. The doctor continued. Blood match confirmed does not mean shared ancestry. It means two blood samples produced a bond response. The room seemed to narrow around them. Whose samples? Dante asked. The doctor pointed to the authorization line. The Moretti family supplied one. The infant supplied the other. Luca's breathing changed. He reached into the torn lining of his jacket and removed something Dante had not found during the search. A thin metal disc hidden beneath the inner seam. The same broken circle symbol was stamped on one side. On the other were two initials. DM Dante took it from him. The metal was warm from Luca's body. His own initials had been engraved there before Luca could walk. My father knew, he said. The doctor's eyes shifted between them. We can confirm it now. She placed a sterile strip against the cut on Dante's palm, then another against Luca's burned hand. The reader should have displayed separate biological profiles. Instead, the screen flashed, reset, and produced a single synchronized pulse. Dante felt it before the machine sounded. Luca's pain moved through his own hand. His heartbeat struck Dante's chest a fraction of a second after each beat in Luca's body. Then Luca looked at him, and the bond opened. Not fully, just enough. Fear flooded Dante. Luca's fear, sharp and buried beneath years of practiced stillness. Beneath it was recognition. He had felt the connection in the warehouse. He had known what it might mean. He had also known what powerful men did to things they considered destined to belong to them. Dante stepped back immediately. The shared sensation weakened, but did not disappear. Fated, the doctor whispered. The two of you are fated mates. The answer closed one mystery and destroyed the shape of the entire story. Dante had believed Carlo sacrificed Luca because he was useless. Then he believed Carlo wanted him dead because Luca exposed Tomas. Both were true, but neither was the beginning. Carlo had not raised his own son and later rejected him. He had taken Dante Moretti's identified mate as an infant, hidden him under the Valeni name, and spent years making sure Luca could never reveal what he knew. Luca wrote with unsteady fingers. I found the disc when I was 16. He added, I asked my father about you. The next line came slower. Tomas took me that night. Dante looked at the scars again. Tomas had not destroyed Luca's voice because of the ledger alone. Luca had discovered who Dante was to him. Carlo had silenced the one person whose existence could have created a bond stronger than the feud. Marco's phone vibrated. He checked the message and went pale. Carlo just contacted every family council in the city. He says you abducted Luca to force a bond and seize Valeni territory. The accusation arrived with evidence. Edited security footage showing Dante gripping Luca in the warehouse, the moment the blockers cracked and Luca recoiled. To anyone watching, it looked like domination. By morning, Dante would not be seen as a man protecting his mate. He would be branded an alpha using fate as a weapon. Luca read the message over Marco's shoulder. His face closed instantly, the fragile trust between them threatened by a fear planted long before their meeting. Dante could have claimed the bond. By the old rules, its confirmation would give him grounds to keep Luca under armed protection. Instead, he took the key to the clinic's rear exit and placed it in Luca's uninjured hand. You are not staying because a test says you belong to me. Luca stared at the key. You can leave, Dante continued. No guards. No debt. No claim. The bond between them tightened with Luca's shock. Dante felt the question Luca could not speak. And if I go? I will still stop Carlo. I will still find Tomas. And I will still make them answer for what they did to you. Luca looked toward the exit, then down at the key. For several seconds, no one moved. Finally, he closed his fingers around it, but did not walk away. He crossed to the desk and wrote one sentence. If Carlo hid me from you, what was he afraid we would become? Before Dante could answer, every light in the clinic shut off. Emergency power flickered red. Marco raised his weapon as a new message appeared on his phone, sent directly from Tomas. It contained a live video of Carlo Valeni standing beside the original ledger. Behind him knelt 3 captured Moretti captains. Bring me Luca before midnight, Carlo said into the camera. Or I release the names, execute your men, and tell the city what happens when a Mafia boss mistakes destiny for consent. The screen went black. Dante looked at Luca, no longer seeing a hostage or even merely the mate fate had assigned him. He saw the living center of a conspiracy built before either of them had been old enough to choose. Their war had never begun with a stolen ledger. It had begun the night 2 families discovered they were fated, and decided that keeping them apart was worth decades of blood. The clinic's emergency lights had barely stabilized when Dante's phone began vibrating without pause. One captain after another sent the same message before their channels went silent. They were surrendering territory to prevent Carlo Valenti from executing the hostages. The damage had already begun. Dante wasn't simply losing ground. He was losing belief. Marco lowered his weapon and met Dante's eyes. If you don't answer Carlo by midnight, the families will say you chose one Omega over your entire organization. Dante didn't answer. He looked at Luca instead. The key to the clinic's back exit was still resting in Luca's hand. He could leave. He didn't. That choice carried more weight than any declaration either of them could have made. Another notification appeared. This time it came from the family council itself. An emergency gathering had been called. Every syndicate leader in the city had received Carlo's accusation along with edited footage of Dante holding Luca while the Omega recoiled in fear. The narrative had already been written. Dante Moretti had kidnapped his enemy's vulnerable Omega heir and intended to force a bond to unite both empires under his control. The truth no longer mattered. Perception did. Marco slammed his fist against the table. They're using the bond against us. No, Dante said quietly. They're using fear. Luca stepped closer and took the pen. They won't stop until one of us disappears. Dante read the sentence twice. It wasn't panic. It was experience. Luca had lived inside Carlo's strategy far longer than Dante had. Then we changed the game, Dante replied. Before anyone could speak again, the clinic's backup generator shut down. Not from sabotage, from an external override. Every electronic lock disengaged simultaneously. Marco cursed under his breath. Someone just found this place. There was no explosion this time. No dramatic assault. Instead, dozens of police sirens echoed outside the abandoned church. Marco checked a security camera powered by an isolated battery. Police vehicles surrounded every entrance. Tactical teams advanced behind armored shields. Anonymous tip, Marco muttered. Illegal weapons trafficking. Dante understood immediately. Carlo wasn't trying to kill them. He wanted the authorities to do it while forcing Dante to protect Luca in public. The bond would become undeniable. Their enemies would never have to explain a single bullet. Rear tunnel, Dante ordered. The doctor hesitated. It collapsed years ago. Luca shook his head. He walked directly toward an old storage room and pulled aside a rusted cabinet, revealing a narrow passage hidden behind loose brickwork. The doctor stared. I didn't know that was there. Luca wrote while Marco opened the entrance. Tomas showed me. Every answer about Tomas only produced another question. Why would the man who destroyed Luca's life repeatedly leave him with knowledge that could one day become useful? They descended into darkness just as the front doors crashed open upstairs. Flashlights swept across the clinic. Officers shouted commands. Marco sealed the hidden entrance behind them. The tunnel ran beneath the old cemetery before splitting into two directions. Dante stopped. Which way? Luca pointed left without hesitation. They moved quickly until Marco suddenly raised his hand. Fresh footprints covered the damp concrete. Someone had passed through recently. Not police. Boots. Heavy. Organized. Dante crouched beside them. We're not the first ones here. Luca knelt beside him, touched one print, then wrote two words. Military pattern. Marco looked up sharply. Private contractors? Dante nodded once. Carlo had adapted again. If police failed, another team would finish the job beyond public view. The tunnel opened into an abandoned freight station. Several vehicles waited there, engines still warm, but empty. One driver's door remained open. Inside lay a satellite phone still connected to an active call. Dante lifted it carefully. A voice spoke immediately. I wondered how long it would take. Carlo. Dante remained silent. Carlo continued anyway. The council accepted my proposal. At midnight, every neutral family will recognize Luca as a Valenti hostage stolen by Moretti. Luca's shoulders stiffened. Bring him to the harbor, Carlo said. Walk away alive. Refuse. And the executions begin. The call ended. Marco looked furious. It's a trap. Of course it is. Dante handed him the phone. But it's also proof. Proof of what? Carlo isn't trying to recover Luca anymore. Dante looked toward the silent Omega. He's trying to control where Luca dies. That realization changed the objective. Until now, Dante believed protecting Luca meant keeping him hidden. It no longer did. As long as Carlo controlled the story, every safe house, every escape route, every hiding place would become another prison. Luca slowly wrote across an old freight receipt. Stop running. Dante met his eyes. You think we go to the harbor? Luca nodded once, then crossed out harbor and wrote another word beneath it. Council. Marco frowned. The council chamber is neutral ground. Luca underlined the word neutral. Then he added, Carlo cannot lie there without witnesses. Dante felt another shift in the bond, not mystical, but deeply human. For the first time, Luca wasn't simply helping him survive. He was shaping strategy, not as a hostage, not as someone being protected, as an equal voice, even without speaking. Marco wasn't convinced. We don't have evidence. Luca reached inside his jacket again. Everyone watched. Instead of another hidden object, he unfolded a small piece of cloth sewn into the lining itself. Inside rested a tiny glass memory capsule no larger than a fingertip. The doctor gasped. Data crystal. Luca nodded. He wrote, Tomas hid it before taking my voice. Dante stared at the crystal. What's inside? Luca hesitated longer than before. His hand trembled. Finally, he wrote 6 words that silenced the room. The recording of my surgery. Marco looked confused. Dante did not. If Tomas had recorded the procedure, then the truth wasn't just about Luca losing his voice. Someone had spoken during that operation. Someone who believed the victim would never tell anyone. The crystal might contain names, orders, or something even more dangerous. Dante closed his fingers around it carefully. Can we read it? The doctor swallowed. Yes, but only with St. Orson equipment. Where? She answered without hesitation. The institute wasn't destroyed. She looked directly at Dante. It was purchased 5 years ago. By who? Her answer landed like another explosion. The Moretti family. Dante felt the floor disappear beneath him. If she was right, then the evidence capable of exposing Carlo, Tomas, and the conspiracy had been hidden inside Dante's own empire all along. And someone powerful enough to inherit his father's secrets had made sure he never knew it existed. Before Dante could decide how to reach the St. Orson Institute, every screen in the freight station lit up at once. Carlo Valenti appeared beneath the seal of the family council, seated at the long black table reserved for emergency judgment. 3 captured Moretti captains knelt behind him with guns at their heads. Dante, Carlo said, you have 1 hour to present Luca before the council. If you refuse, your men die, your territories are divided, and the city recognizes you as an outlaw. The feed widened. Council representatives filled every seat. Carlo had not merely called a meeting. He had taken control of it. Then Tomas stepped into frame carrying the original ledger. Luca's face drained of color. And if you bring the data crystal, Tomas added, we will prove that your father purchased St. Orson to manufacture a false bond. The threat struck at the one truth Dante had only just discovered. Carlo was preparing to turn the evidence into another accusation before Dante could even see it. Marco checked the station exits. Red targeting lights appeared across the broken windows. Contractors had surrounded the building without firing a shot. They want us alive until the council sees Luca, he said. After that, they can kill us legally. Luca took the pen, but before he could write, the glass memory capsule in Dante's hand flashed once. A remote signal had activated it. The capsule began to heat. The doctor grabbed a metal container and forced Dante to drop it inside. Someone is trying to erase the recording. She connected a portable reader, but the display showed rapid data corruption. We need St. Orson's system now, or whatever is inside will be gone in 30 minutes. Their choices collapsed into one impossible line. The Institute held the only equipment capable of recovering the recording. The council deadline expired in 1 hour. Carlo controlled both destinations. Dante looked at the city map on Marco's phone. St. Orson stood 6 blocks from the council chamber, inside Moretti territory that had already declared neutrality. We go to the Institute first, Dante said. Recover the recording. Then we take it to the council. Marco stared at him. That leaves us maybe 10 minutes to cross 6 blocks under fire. Then don't waste one. They left through the freight tunnel while the contractors tightened their perimeter above. Luca moved beside Dante, but the bond carried a new tension between them. Not fear of Carlo. Fear of what the recording might prove. If Tomas was telling even part of the truth, Dante's family had not merely known about the bond. They might have created the system that trapped Luca inside it. At the first junction, Luca stopped and wrote, "If your father ordered it, what will you do?" Dante answered without hesitation, "Expose him." Luca held his gaze, searching for the limit of that promise. Then he wrote, "Even if it destroys your name? A name that requires your silence deserves to be destroyed." Luca folded the paper, but the bond did not ease. Words were no longer enough. They reached St. Orizon through a drainage entrance beneath the institute. The building above looked abandoned, yet the basement doors opened to Dante's palm print. Lights activated section by section. Files filled climate-controlled rooms. Medical restraints stood beneath spotless lamps. Dante's family crest marked every cabinet. The evidence was physical, undeniable, and far worse than he expected. His father had not simply purchased the institute. He had preserved it. Luca moved through the corridor like someone walking back into a nightmare. At the final lab, the doctor inserted the damaged crystal into a sealed console. Recovery began at 42%. A recording appeared in broken fragments. Luca at 16, strapped to a chair, Tomas preparing surgical instruments, Carlo watching from behind the glass. Then another figure entered wearing a Moretti signet ring. The image distorted before his face became visible. Dante leaned closer. "Who is that?" The audio cleared for 3 seconds. A man's voice said, "If the bond activates, Dante loses the empire." The recording froze. Recovery stalled at 51%. Luca backed away from the screen. Dante felt betrayal hit through the bond. Not certainty that Dante was guilty, but terror that he might become like the men who came before him. Before Dante could reach him, steel shutters crashed over the laboratory doors. Tomas's voice came through the intercom. "Thank you for opening the archive." Security monitors showed him entering the building with armed contractors. He had followed Dante because only a Moretti blood signature could unlock the deepest records. "You were never taking Luca to the council," Dante said. "No," Tomas replied. "I was waiting for you to bring me here." The console changed. Recovery reversed. Files began copying to an external system. Tomas was taking the entire archive, proof powerful enough to control every family implicated in St. Orizon's. Research. Marco fired at the door controls. Nothing happened. 3 minutes before they reach us. The doctor worked frantically. "I can finish recovering the recording or stop the transfer." Not both. If she stopped the transfer, they would lose the only evidence that could clear Luca and expose Carlo. If she completed the recording, Tomas would obtain decades of secrets and gain enough leverage to control the city. Dante looked at Luca. This was the kind of choice powerful men had always made for him. Sacrifice one person for an empire, then call it necessary. Dante stepped away from the console. "Finish Luca's recording." Marco turned on him. "Boss, Tomas will own every name in those files. Then we deal with him after Luca gets his truth." The decision cost Dante immediately. Marco's expression hardened, not with disloyalty, but with the realization that Dante had chosen one life over the structure holding all of theirs together. The transfer passed 70%. The recording reached 63. On screen, the unknown Moretti figure removed his glove. A scar crossed his wrist. Dante recognized it. Not his father. His uncle Vittorio, the man currently presiding over the family council in Dante's absence. The conflict changed again. Vittorio had inherited the Moretti archives, hidden St. Orizon, and allowed Dante to believe Carlo was the sole architect of the war. The recording continued. Vittorio told Tomas, "Silence the Omega. Keep Dante angry. As long as they remain enemies, neither bond nor alliance can threaten us." Luca closed his eyes. The feud had not been an accident, and Carlo had not acted alone. Both families had protected their power by destroying 2 lives before they could choose each other. The laboratory door buckled under the first explosive charge. Recovery hit 90%. The doctor shouted, "Almost there." Then Marco's phone rang. He answered, and the voice on the other end made him go still. One of the captured captains was screaming. A gunshot followed. Carlo returned to the line. 50 minutes are over, he said. I moved the deadline. Another gun pressed against the next captive's head. Bring Luca to the council now, or I execute one man every 60 seconds. The recording completed. The full file transferred onto the crystal just as Tomas breached the outer corridor. Dante took the capsule, but Luca caught his wrist. He wrote quickly, Give me to Carlo. Save your men. Dante shook his head. Luca underlined the sentence, then added, this ends if I go. Through the bond, Dante felt what Luca intended. He did not believe Carlo would spare him. He was offering his life because he still saw himself as the most expendable piece on the board. The deepest wound had survived every discovery, every act of protection, every choice Dante had given him. Outside the lab, Tomas's men set the final charge. At the council, another 60-second countdown began. Dante had the evidence that could destroy both families, but no safe route to present it. His captains were dying. Tomas was seconds away. And Luca was asking to become a hostage again, this time willingly. The door exploded inward. Dante raised his weapon, but Luca moved faster. He seized the emergency release, opened the rear containment passage, and locked Dante, Marco, and the doctor behind a blast barrier. Then he stepped into the smoke alone, the crystal hidden in his burned hand. Tomas aimed at him and smiled. Luca looked back through the glass at Dante, pressed his palm over his heart, and allowed the contractors to take him. Dante struck the barrier hard enough to split his knuckles. For the first time since the abduction, Luca was no longer in his custody. He was in the hands of the men who had stolen his childhood, his voice, and his right to choose. On the laboratory monitor, Carlo's countdown stopped. A new message appeared beneath the council seal. Bring the recording, Dante. Come alone. Dante stared through the smoke as Luca disappeared down the corridor, and the choice before him became unavoidable. To save Luca, he would have to walk into the council chamber, surrender the empire his family had killed to preserve, and expose every Moretti secret in front of the people most determined to keep them buried. Dante stopped trying to break the blast barrier and made the one decision his family had spent 20 years preventing. He ordered Marco to transmit the entire St. Orzan archive to every member of the family council. Not just Luca's recording, Dante said. Everything. Marco stared at him. That destroys the Moretti name. Then let it burn. The words changed the room. Dante was no longer trying to preserve his empire while saving Luca. He was choosing Luca's freedom over the system that had made him a hostage long before the abduction. Marco connected the laboratory console to the council's encrypted channel. The archive began uploading, but Tomas had already taken control of the building's network. A warning flashed across the screen. Remote termination in 4 minutes. He'll erase the servers, the doctor said. Dante looked through the smoke-filled corridor where Luca had disappeared. Then 4 minutes is enough. Marco opened the barrier using Dante's blood authorization. Dante stepped through alone, injured shoulder rigid beneath his ruined shirt. He carried no ledger and no army. Only the data crystal containing Luca's surgery and a live transmitter linked to the archive. Tomas's contractors had withdrawn toward the council chamber, taking Luca with them. They believed Dante would follow. This time, they were right. By the time Dante entered the council hall, every neutral family in the city was watching. Carlo sat at the central table. Vittorio occupied the Moretti seat as if it had always belonged to him. Tomas stood behind Luca, one hand gripping the silent Omega's injured wrist, and the other holding a gun against his ribs. The captured Moretti captains remained on their knees along the wall. No one spoke when Dante crossed the floor. Carlo's gaze moved to the transmitter in his hand. Where is the recording? Dante placed the crystal on the table. Already broadcasting. Vittorio rose. In the transmission. You can end it, Dante said. The moment you release Luca and every captive in this room. Carlo smiled without warmth. You came to bargain with evidence that condemns you? No, Dante looked at the council cameras. I came to surrender everything it condemns. Marco's upload reached the first external server. Screens around the chamber filled with St. Orzan files, payments, compatibility tests, forced separations, and names belonging to families seated in the room. Vittorio's authority cracked first. Council members turned toward him as Luca's surgery recording began to play. They saw the restraints. Tomas's instruments. Carlo behind the glass. Then Vittorio's face appeared, ordering Tomas to destroy Luca's voice and keep Dante hostile. The room erupted. Carlo reached for the crystal, but Dante placed his gun on the table and pushed it away from himself. There is no forced bond, he said. No territorial claim. No Moretti demand. He turned toward Luca. And no hostage. The declaration cost him everything at once. Without claiming Luca through the bond, Dante surrendered the only rule that might have given him legal control over the situation. Without defending his family's secrets, he surrendered his position. Several Moretti captains lowered their heads. Vittorio seized the moment. Then he is still Valenti property. Luca flinched at the word. Dante did not. He is no one's property. Tomas tightened his grip on Luca and pressed the gun harder against him. Pretty words from the man who kidnapped him. Dante met Luca's eyes. The same dark eyes that had looked at him from the warehouse floor without pleading. This time, Dante did not command him. He opened his empty hand. Luca, you choose. Silence spread through the chamber. It was the one answer Carlo, Vittorio, and Tomas had never prepared for. Their entire conspiracy depended on decisions being made around Luca, about Luca, and for Luca. Tomas dragged him backward. He can't speak. Dante kept his hand extended. He doesn't need to. Luca's gaze dropped to the gun Dante had pushed away, then to the council doors, then back to Dante's open palm. He could run. He could return to Carlo. He could reject both families. The choice was visible to everyone. Tomas sensed control slipping and raised the weapon toward Dante. Luca moved first. He drove his burned palm against Tomas's wrist, knocking the barrel aside. The shot struck the ceiling. Dante crossed the distance before Tomas could recover, but he did not fire. He trapped Tomas's arm, forced the weapon down, and gave Luca room to step away. Marco and the freed captains moved only after Luca reached the center of the chamber. The action was not a rescue imposed on him. It was protection made possible by his choice. Tomas was disarmed. Carlo tried to leave, but the council doors had already sealed. The archive had exposed his payments, his orders, and the falsified footage used against Dante. Vittorio demanded loyalty from the Moretti captains. None answered. His power had depended on secrets. Dante had made secrecy impossible. You have destroyed your own empire, Vittorio said. Dante looked at Luca. It was never worth what it cost him. The council voted before dawn. Carlo and Vittorio were stripped of protection and detained pending judgment by the families they had manipulated. Tomas was taken alive, his own code in the ledger linking him to every staged attack that had prolonged the feud. The captured captains were released. The war ended not because one family defeated the other, but because Dante had removed the lie that kept both sides fighting. Yet when the chamber finally emptied, Luca remained near the central table, the key to the clinic's rear exit still in his pocket. Dante stood several feet away. He did not touch him. The bond is real, Dante said, but it gives me no right to ask you to stay. Luca took out the pen. His injured hand shook as he wrote on the back of the council's judgment order. Dante waited. Luca turned the paper around. You gave up everything. Dante read it, then answered, No, I gave up what should never have mattered more than you. Luca's eyes filled, but he did not look away. He wrote again. I went with Tomas because I thought my life was the smallest price. Dante's chest tightened as the truth of Luca's wound finally stood between them. It isn't, he said. Not to me, and it never will be again. Luca looked toward the open doors. Freedom was only a few steps away. Then he folded the judgment order, placed it on the table, and crossed the space between them by his own decision. His uninjured hand settled inside Dante's open palm. The bond moved through them, not as a command, not as ownership, but as recognition freely accepted. Around them, the council chamber remained scarred by shattered glass, dropped weapons, and the remains of two fallen empires. The conflict was over. Dante had exposed the conspiracy, defeated the men who controlled it, and released the hostage he had once taken as leverage. But as Luca's fingers closed around his, Dante understood that victory was not the moment a captor kept what fate had placed in his hands. It was the moment he let go, and was chosen anyway. Morning arrived without gunfire. For the first time in years, the silence over the city did not belong to fear. It belonged to everything that had finally been exposed. The council chambers stood open behind them as investigators carried away the St. Orson archives, the original ledger, and every record that had survived the night. Carlo Valenti, Vittorio Moretti, and Tomas were led away under guard, not as untouchable rulers, but as men stripped of the power they had built on lies. Dante watched them leave without triumph. Vengeance had driven him for years. It was not what remained. Luca stood beside him, the same quiet figure who had once been dragged into a warehouse as a hostage. No restraints circled his wrists now. No guards surrounded him. For several long moments, Neither of them moved. Marco approached with a sealed envelope. "The council's final judgment," he said. "The Moretti organization survives, but only if someone new leads it." Dante did not take the envelope. "Find someone who still believes power is worth keeping," he answered. Marco frowned. "You're walking away?" Dante glanced toward Luca before looking back at his oldest friend. "If leading it means repeating what my family became, then I already have my answer." Marco studied him, then slowly nodded. It was not agreement. It was understanding. He placed the envelope on the council table and walked away without another word. Luca watched the exchange before taking out the familiar pen that had traveled with him from the warehouse to the council chamber. He hesitated, then wrote on the back of the unopened envelope, "You really mean it?" Dante smiled faintly. "I do." Luca looked at the envelope for another second. Then he slid it farther away from Dante. The simple gesture carried more meaning than any speech. Neither of them reached for it again. 2 weeks later, St. Orzin was no longer a secret institute. Its doors were opened under public investigation. Survivors came forward one after another. Families who had spent years believing they had been cursed or abandoned learned they had been manipulated instead. The records Luca had protected helped identify victims whose names had been erased. Every testimony weakened the old system a little more. Dante returned often, not as an owner, but as a witness. One afternoon, he found Luca standing inside the same examination room where the surgery recording had been made. The restraints were gone. The operating chair had already been dismantled. Sunlight now reached the room through a window that investigators had uncovered behind a false wall. Luca stepped toward the empty space where the chair had once stood. His breathing remained uneven, but he did not look away. Dante stopped several feet behind him. He did not enter the room until Luca turned and nodded once. Only then did he cross the threshold. Protection no longer meant deciding for him. It meant waiting until Luca chose to let him in. Luca touched the scar along his throat. Then he wrote on a clean page, "I thought this room would always own me." Dante read the sentence carefully before handing the notebook back. "Does it?" Luca looked around one last time. Slowly, he crossed out the word always. They left together without either of them looking back. Months passed. The city changed in quiet ways. Checkpoints disappeared. Rival crews no longer fought over streets that had once been soaked in blood. Marco eventually accepted leadership of what remained of the Moretti network under strict agreements with the council, while Dante refused every title offered to him. He chose instead to oversee the restitution process for the survivors connected to St. Orzin. Luca stayed because he wanted to, not because anyone asked him to. He still rarely spoke. Doctors told him that some physical recovery might be possible with additional surgery, but no one promised success. One afternoon, they placed consent forms in front of him. Luca read every page. Then he folded the papers and set them aside. Dante looked at him. "You don't have to decide today." Luca smiled softly and wrote, "I spent years believing my voice was the only thing they stole." He paused before adding another line. "They were wrong." Dante waited. Luca continued, "They never took my choice. I only forgot I still had it." Dante felt the familiar warmth of the bond, quieter now than before. It no longer arrived like a command or an instinct. It felt like trust, something earned instead of claimed. Later that evening, they returned to the old warehouse, one final time before it was demolished. Broken concrete still marked the place where Dante had first pointed a gun beneath Luca's chin. The walls were empty. The cameras were gone. Rust colored the floor where blood had once dried. Luca walked to the exact spot where he had stood as a prisoner. He looked at Dante, then deliberately took the pen from his pocket and placed it on the ground between them. It had carried every conversation they had shared, every fear, every warning, every truth he could not speak aloud. Dante looked from the pen to Luca, but made no move toward either. "Your choice," he said quietly. Luca smiled through eyes bright with tears. He bent down, picked up the pen himself, and slipped it back into his pocket. Then, instead of writing, he reached for Dante's hand. The scar across Dante's palm, left by Luca's nails on the night of the kidnapping, rested against the healed burn on Luca's own hand. The old wounds no longer felt like chains. They felt like reminders of the choices that had changed both of them. Together they walked toward the warehouse doors. No guards followed. No orders were given. No one decided their future except the two of them. As they stepped into the afternoon light, Luca paused and looked back only once. The building where he had entered as a hostage would soon disappear forever. He turned away before the wrecking machines began their work. Dante waited until Luca chose to take the first step forward. Then he walked beside him, never ahead. Long ago, Dante Moretti had taken his enemy's mute Omega son as a hostage. In the end, he kept only the one thing that had ever truly mattered, because after being given every chance to leave, Luca chose his own future, and for the first time in his life, no one else chose it for him.